This review was filmed during the 2023 WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes. Without the labor of the writers and actors currently on strike, the works being covered here wouldn't exist. I fully support the WGA and SAG-AFTRA in their fight for fair treatment and compensation against a system that continually denies them such. While a full boycott has not been called for, SAG-AFTRA has asked that everyone who does media about film and TV refrain from promoting struck content during this time. From what I can tell based on guidelines they have released, independent reviews do not constitute promotion of a work, but critical assessment of said work of art. Any praise that I give to these works during this video should be seen as praise purely for the artists, writers, and actors who created it. If anything, the praise is emphasizing that the writers, actors, and other artists deserve more compensation because they are who make these works possible. Additionally, this video was not made using any studio-provided screeners or materials. Do not support any studios during the strike. Look, it's the musical episode of Star Trek. I am obligated to do this, so I am apologizing in advance, but it's been a long road getting from there to here. It's been a long time, but my time is finally near. Had to do it, like I said. Hello interwebs, and welcome to my review of the latest and penultimate episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2, Episode 9, Subspace Rhapsody. And if my overlong intro did not clue you in, this was something that Star Trek has never done before in doing a musical episode. Now, to be fair, because I know you Trekkies out there like me will be like, actually, Star Trek has done music before. All the way back in the original series even, Uhura sang a song with Spock, aboard the Starship Enterprise, and it was a mildly speciesist, xenophobic song towards Spock, carrying him to the devil.
Oh, on the Starship Enterprise, there's someone who's in Satan's guise. Whose devil ears and devil eyes could rip your heart from you.
It was a whole thing. Anywho, there's also singing episodes of Deep Space Nine.
Viva!
Riker's always playing his trombone everywhere.
You know, this is a much better way of communicating for you. It's far less confusing than the way you normally speak.
So, like, Star Trek has done music, but it has never done a musical, and as soon as I heard that this episode was happening, I was so freaking excited, because I love it when Star Trek does strange new things. That's what Star Trek should do, and I know there's some fans out there, and I understand to a degree where this comes from, feeling that this is too gimmicky, or that's something that Star Trek wouldn't or shouldn't do, considering it's based in science, and I've always been here being like, you know, you have episodes where people turn into salamanders and have sex, and, like, space ghost sex candles. So I feel like a musical episode is warranted. And staying spoiler free before we get into the nitty gritty of this episode, this one was a lot of fun. It falls into that genre of TV musical episodes that I love, that has kind of gone away in the past few years, but I hope makes a comeback with this, which is the musical episode where they have to come up with a conceit within the universe, and it's like, we have to solve why we're singing. I know Buffy the Vampire Slayer kind of had that as the Once More with Feeling episode, which is a great episode. So like, that was just, I love that, like, we're singing musical for some reason, we need to figure out why sort of conceit of these types of episodes, and this one does that. Now, that being said, and I'm gonna be honest, I am not a huge like music person. I don't know all the nitty gritty, so I will say some people who have better knowledge than this can speak better on it, but I do have some notes on this episode that I'll get into more into when I go into spoilers. But just to give some overriding things, there are a couple actors in this that you can clearly tell are trying their best but not quite singers. I think Anson Mount kind of falls in that, Ethan Peck as well, and there's like a song where like Spock gets to sing that I feel is very much like that. We need Spock to sing in this episode, so we have to give him, I mean, it's Spock, he has to sing, and Ethan Peck, he tries his best, but certainly he doesn't really get there, and in a way I kind of find that also an endearing part of the TV episode formula, but it was noticeable to a degree. And then the other thing with this one, just to, that I think is a little bit more of a heavier critique for me, is that I don't need every single song in a musical episode like this to have like big opening numbers and a bunch of like, you know, choreography and all this stuff. And there are a few songs in this episode that do have a ton of choreography in it. But I did feel at times that a couple of the songs just felt like characters in rooms walking aimlessly and singing, which again, you can do every once in a while, but I feel like this just a lot of the songs are just characters aimlessly singing, and I found that to be sadly a little bit disappointing, because when we do get some choreography in this episode, it is wonderful and amazing, and I adore it. So I wish we had a little bit more of that, maybe 1 or 2 more songs with just like a big bunch of choreography, but I know that is logistically difficult to do. And I believe this season was still being filmed during the pandemic, so the fact that they were able to get any of it done it would be shocking. And to be fair, we are still, under COVID restrictions as well to this day. So, I think that they managed to get any of it done is a credit to them, but it was just something I noticed is like a lot of singing in rooms. The things that I will give to this episode's benefit, though, that I really did love is that so many of the songs are character-based. I think it would have been very, very easy and very much falling into the gimmick of it being a musical episode to have a lot of the songs be like Star Trek-y, of like, let's sing a song about the Warp Core, or like, let's sing a song about like Klingons. Like it could have been very gimmicky, like singing about like broad Star Trek stuff. And they don't. A lot of these songs are rooted in character stuff and specific character stuff that we've been dealing with throughout the season. Specifically, La'an gets sort of the biggest stuff. Spock and Chapel get some as well, and a few other characters here and there along the way. And I really thought that was the smart move, the right move, and I think it keeps this episode from leaning too hard into the gimmick, even though it is a gimmick. And I really think that is to this episode's credit. And to wrap out, I will say, and we'll get into some of this in the specifics, I liked a lot of the songs, but only a few of them were like real bangers for me, and none of them were bad. I don't think any of the songs were outright bad to my knowledge. Some of the singing was on the border there, but no, the songs were all, I think, really solid, but only a few like really hit it out of the park, and they don't necessarily compare as much to like the Scrubs episode or Once More the Feeling from Buffy, the Joss Whedon of it all aside. I think those are like 2 of the, right to my mind, the best musical episodes in my lifetime that I really remember. I'm sure there's other ones that other people can think of, and I don't think this episode really hits those heights, unfortunately, but it is certainly not bad, but it doesn't hit, I think this episode is really, really good, but I don't think it's hitting that great category that like the second episode of the season or the Lower Decks episode this season really hit for me. But it's certainly a very positive one and a very exciting one. I'm really glad Star Trek did this. So that's kind of my feelings on this on sort of a broad spoiler-free sense, but let's get into spoilers because there is so much fun to talk about with this episode, and I will, again, just to reiterate, had a ton of fun with this episode and found it very joyous. All right, everybody, let's get into spoilers because I have a lot to talk about here. I'm kind of going to go through it really quickly because, again, I am not a music person, so I'm just going to be like, I liked this song for most of it. But let's just kind of go through this. We start off the episode kind of touching with a bunch of characters. The biggest thing for me is that Chapel is applying for a fellowship with a certain Roger Corby, and that name should ring a bell to all of you Trekkies out there because Roger Corby is the character, and this is a spoiler potentially for future stuff, but if you've seen the original series, you would know. Corby is actually the man that Chapel eventually marries. So I'm curious to see his name come up here because my guess is, based on where this episode goes, is that she gets the fellowship, as we see in this episode, and she's going to go into the fellowship between seasons, and in season 3, she's going to come back in season 3 married to Corby, or in a relationship to Corby, and Spock's going to be butthurt about it, and that's what's going to sort of like create some rocky tension with him and T'Pring and Chapel and all of that stuff. So that's kind of my guess what's going to happen there. It is interesting, and this was a problematic element of the original series, and Corby, by the way, if you watch that episode, problematic dude. He made robot sex dolls, and it's the episode where Kirk has the penis rock.
She simply obeys orders. She has no meaning for me. There's no emotional bond. Andrea, kiss Captain Kirk.
For all of you who don't remember which episode that is. So yeah, Corby, not a great dude, at least in the original series, but it's also weirder too that he's her boss, which sort of adds an extra like edge to it considering it's a fellowship, but that was just kind of part of the original series, unfortunately. But then the rest of this, we get Kirk showing up, which I was excited to see that Kirk gets to be part of the musical episode. And then we have this fold in space that, Spock sends music into, and that's sort of what causes everything to go haywire with this sort of like weird music fold that they're studying. Again, it's sort of Star Trekian nonsense to get to the fun bits of musical, but I did really like it. And I loved the first song that we get here, which is very much the one of 2 Star Trek-y types of songs that we get, which is like everyone sort of being like, I'm checking the transmission. Like that felt like the Star Trek-esque kind of song that I wanted to have. It's sort of like the broad gimmick, and I'm glad we got one at the end, and then that was sort of it. And so this was just a lot of fun. I love that it ends with them being like, why are we singing? Also, speaking of this song, something that is both funny and frustrating to me is Ortegas, because Ortegas only really gets to sing during this song, and her lyrics in this song are quite literally, "Hey, I fly the ship," which is kind of a reiteration of what we saw way back in, I think, what was it, episode 4, where it was, again, her story beat was, "I'm Ortegas and I fly the ship." And many of us fans were promised this season that we would get an Ortegas episode, and it appears that episode 4 was that episode. And I think a lot of us were disappointed that all we really got for her was, "Hey, I'm Ortegas and I fly the ship," and to then have that still just be all she gets in this episode, that same beat reiterated, is very, very frustrating. Not because, like, I love Ortegas, and I don't need her to be, like, a super developed character, but it is frustrating when the show keeps teasing us with, like, we're gonna develop her, and it just ends up being, "I fly the ship." It just feels like they read her, like, character bio that, like, they probably had her audition with, and be like, "Hey, audition with this, this is your character blurb, you're Ortegas, and you fly the ship." And then that's all they've really done to develop her character. It's like, don't tease us that you're going to develop her character and then just really do nothing with her. It is frustrating, but also kind of funny that that's all she sings about in this episode. So just a little bit of frustration there. Then we cut to the opening credits, and the opening credits are vocalized, which was really fun. It's funny because I sing along with the opening credits all the time, and I really adored that. One thing that I will say that I'm disappointed, I'm so upset with this episode 4, is that they didn't do what I was really hoping, which was, if for those of you who know, in the original series, there's that original theme song. But there are actually lyrics to that theme song, because Gene Roddenberry was very petty and decided to write shitty lyrics to that theme song that were never actually officially ever sung, so that he could get money off of the residuals for that song and steal it from Alexander Courage a little bit. Shitty thing of Gene Roddenberry to have done. That being said, I thought it would have been funny to, in this episode, at some point, they sing the original series lyrics and just make fun of them. Like, "Beyond the rim of the starlight." It's something like that. It's terrible. I performed it in one of my videos before on my main channel, and it's just a lot of fun how bad they are. Beyond the rim of the starlight, my love is wandering in starflight. But then we come back from the opening credits and we sort of get this like them basically explaining the Star Trek-y nonsense science. And I love it when Star Trek does like, yeah, I don't know, we're singing Star Trek sci-fi nonsense. And there's like, it's a zipper in space. I thought all of that was fun. Then we get a Kirk and Una scene as they're figuring out what to do with this. And it's Kirk and Una begin to sing about like, you know, being open to your crew. And I love that Una sings about her Gilbert and Sullivan, you know, music that she really likes. I love that being a recurring thing for her. And I like this being like Kirk learning how to, like, he needs to connect with his crew, how he's like, and I like this idea that Kirk is learning to be a better commander from Una. That feels like something we never got to see, this part of Kirk's life where he gets to learn how to be a commander, and getting that advice from Una in song is kind of a fun little beat to me. But then La'an is sort of sadly singing, watching from the side, and she goes off and has her own sort of sad song. And what I love about this song, again, I'm not a music person, so I'm not going to judge the lyrics of the music. I thought it was fine. I liked it. But what I liked about this song specifically was that La'an is, you know, I was worried that, and I think there is a concern, especially with Chapel to a degree, but they've kind of moved beyond it a little bit. But the concern I had was like a lot of the women on Star Trek were being, at least Strange New Worlds, were being defined by like worrying about a man in their life, like Chapel worrying about Spock, and now La'an sort of thinking about Kirk and sort of things like that. And so I over worry about women with that. But what I like about this song is that while that does come up, La'an's overriding bigger feeling that she expresses in the song is her unwillingness to be emotionally vulnerable with anybody, not just be emotionally vulnerable to say that she has feelings for Kirk. So I did enjoy that La'an sort of was expressing that element that is core to her, of being a very closed-off emotional person, and that was connecting through her feelings for Kirk, but that was not the central issue. And I thought I thought that was a great balance to handle with her character. Not to say that she couldn't sing about like having feelings for a dude, that's not a problem. But I think I like that it came out of like her core character. We then have her going to Pike and be like, look, this is a security breach so that we don't, people getting heightened emotions, that's what's setting everything off. And Pike's like, it'll be fine. And then having a private conversation on the bridge with Patel was hilarious. Again, Anson Mount, not really a huge singer, so it was very clear that the writers are like, all right, well, we'll give Anson Mount like a spoken word song that he's only singing half of this bit, and it gets cut off as well. But I do like that this sort of sets off like the fleet getting hit with the entirety of all of this, and I'm like, oh boy, the entire Starfleet fleet is singing. I love it. Yeah, so just very clearly like trying to tamp down Anson Mount not having a ton of singing to do. Then we also start to learn like they're in a musical reality and everything's following the rules of musicals. So big heightens, big emotions is sort of what's setting it off. You know, I like that. I like that Pike sort of like blow it up now after his embarrassment on the bridge. He's like, all right, I'm done with it. Let's just see what we can do. Then we get Una calling out La'an very hard. I'm like, you have feelings for Kirk. You need to deal with it. And then they have this sort of like song that she sings about, you know, getting to extra emotions. And I thought it was so extra that La'an and Una were like floating in the room. I'm like, oh my god, of course they turn off the gravity and do that. That was wonderful. So over the top. The only thing I thought was weird during that song is we cut to Chapel and Mbenga during that section, and I was like, oh yeah, I get there's like a thematic resonance a little bit here with these characters, but with her like being like, oh, I'm gonna be leaving, but it felt a little weird to like cut away there. It threw me a little bit at that moment. But then we have Kirk and La'an sort of going off on their own, and La'an kind of being like, all right, I want to kind of talk to him. And I just have to say, like, Kirk just gives off these, like, I'm hitting on everybody vibes. He's such a disaster bisexual, Kirk is. Where he's just like, oh yeah, we work great together. And I'm like, Kirk, are you just hitting on, like, everything he does, he's just hitting on somebody. I think later on he mentions, like, we make great partners. I'm like, you're just picking your words either very carefully or very poorly, Kirk, and I love it. One thing I thought was funny is when the ship shook after they got the particles that they needed to see if they could blow up the fold, is that Kirk like holds La'an really briefly to check on her to make sure she's safe, and it reminded me of the holds that Kirk did to Yeoman Rand back in the original series, and those were always done when like the ship shook and Yeoman Rand's like, oh Kirk, hold me. The very 1960s, like, oh, the woman needs to be protected by, you know, the guy. But I like that they sort of like had a subtle reference to it here with Kirk doing that to La'an and sort of it being just a physical movement that Kirk does. So I thought that was a nice like subtle reference that either was in the script or the director did it, or Paul Wesley just chose to do it himself. So I thought that was just a cool little nod. Then we learned that the Klingons are getting into the musical stuff, and they were like, oh god, we don't want to hear Klingons. And I'm like, I want it. I want to hear Klingons. I want to hear Klingon opera. And one thing that like concerned me, and it comes back around towards the end, we'll talk about it when we get there, but one thing that did concern me at this moment is like the Klingons call and says, oh, we want to blow up the thing and force you to deal with stop our dishonor or whatever. And I'm like, but for Klingons, part of Klingon culture we learned from Next Generation onwards in terms of when the shows came out is that Klingons actually view singing as like a very honorable thing. Like Klingon opera is such a big deal. Like showing emotions is actually seen as masculine and manly and honorable and warrior spirit in their culture. And so them to say like it was dishonor for music, I was like, oh, that feels weird. I do want to hear Klingon opera, and I hope the show isn't being like, oh, it's dishonorable that Klingons are singing, because that's like a core part of, you know, I'm here to rewrite canon, but that feels like very core to the ethos of Klingons. Thankfully, that's not the case, though they do something else later that we'll get to that I have thoughts on. But then we have Uhura and Spock sort of being like, all right, what can we do? How can we figure out what's going on with the ship and how to figure out how to stop this? And they come up with this, you have to like listen to the first few beats of a song, and so they need to create emotions, and so they instigate something with Chapel. And I will say, I loved this Chapel number. I want to say that Nurse Chapel's voice was very auto-tuned in this song. Maybe I misheard, but that's kind of the vibe that I got from it. But I loved the song, but gosh, it was so hurtful when she says like, you know, I need to live, if I need to leave you, I won't fight. I'm like, oh man, digging a knife right into Spock, my girl. And I also love, this is one of the songs that I loved the choreography for, like adored the choreography. One thing I will say, speaking of disaster bisexuals, there's that one bit where like Chapel sits down next to the two ladies, and I'm like, we're very much seeing Chapel's bisexuality here. This has been something that I've wished Star Trek Strange New Worlds had been better about. And this is like a common thing that you see with a lot of bisexual characters, because we did learn that in an offhanded line that Chapel is bisexual in season 1. But one of the big problems with that is that she's never really shown to show attraction to a lot of women. And I'm not saying like every bisexual character needs to go around being like, I'm bisexual, look at the women around me, or look at the men around me. Because, you know, bisexuality can be fluid for many people. I'm bisexual, and I have a fluid sort of relationship with who I'm attracted to at different moments. But even if it's static, you know, it's okay to only be attracted to one, like to visually only show attraction to one gender. It doesn't negate your bisexuality. Everyone's different. But most often I find when people write bisexual characters, they will often write them in straight appearing relationships and just say they're bi, and then never actually write the characters as if they're bisexual elsewhere, and never show them expressing attraction or like being like, oh, that girl's hot or anything. Just sort of like say it to get like the bisexuality points. And that's kind of felt like the what they've done with Chapel. So I like that we got a little bit of teasing of it here, but again, I would like a little bit more explicitness with that, or a little bit more showcasing of that, rather than it sort of being like, oh, in the musical number she'll dance with some women in a kind of hot way. That being said, that's a larger conversation. I loved it here, and I loved the choreography. This is a lot of fun. I was like, oh my god, Chapel is now also being a disaster bi. I am here for it. But then Spock's little heart is broken. And then we have a great scene between Kirk and La'an, where La'an opens up about her feelings for Kirk, and her being like, the reason I have feelings for you is because the other you saw me. And I didn't feel like this baggage of having to be like this thing that everyone always has like negative expectations of, or, just the Khan Noonien sing of it all, I guess. And I like Kirk being like, yes, I see it too, I feel it too, but I'm in a relationship with Carol Marcus right now, and she's having my baby. And I'm like, oh, David. This would be around the time that he would have, been having David. David Marcus, obviously from Star Trek 2, Star Trek 3, and then getting murdered in Star Trek 3, and makes Kirk racist towards Klingons in Star Trek 6, which is a great arc for his character. But yeah, that's David Marcus. So yeah, it was nice to see that sort of come up, and it makes sense, and I like that quite a lot, even though it is tear my heart out, La'an. And I hope there's an arc for La'an where she's able to see that she doesn't need someone else to show her that she can be her full self without having to worry about others' expectations of her. So I hope that the arc that they take her on in this is that you don't need Kirk for this. Kirk helped you realize this, both this version and the other version, but you can do that on your own, and I hope that's her arc, and I would love that for her. I would love that arc quite a lot. Then we get the Spock sad song, I'm going to be honest, I watched this episode with some friends, and my friends, Ethan Peck, we all agreed, Ethan Peck, not the best singer, but Spock had to sing, because it's Star Trek. But that being said, my other friends did not like this song. They thought the rhyming scheme wasn't great, and again, I'm not the best judge of that, so I will trust their judgment on that. But for me, I kind of enjoyed the song because it did feel like very Spockian, in that he would kind of have an awkward song cadence. He would be singing about relationships in a sort of like X plus Y, these are the variables. It felt like a very Spocky type of song to sing, and I like the double entendre of the X, like he's the X to her Y and all that jazz, but also he's her X because he's feeling like she's going to break up with him. So I thought that double entendre was kind of fun. Again, I'm sure the song could have been better, at least according to my friends. For me, I'm not the best analyzer of rhyming schemes, so I'll leave it to their judgment. However, this is followed up by a Uhura song, which is about her like feeling solo but wanting to keep people connected. I love this song. Probably my second favorite song of the episode. My favorite at this point, but the last song of the episode takes the cake for me. But Uhura's song I thought was easily just the best. You could tell Rose Gooding was just so she can sing. She can definitely sing. Her and the La'an actress, they can both sing. We know this, and so does Una as well. But the two of them especially. And this song was great. I loved it. It felt very Star Trek-y, and felt great to Uhura, someone who is like, we don't see her ever get in a relationship in all of Star Trek, but she is someone who connects everybody, both as a communications officer and in other ways as well. So I love that Uhura gets that as a song, and that leading to the big communal number. She's like, we need to blow it up with a big ending number to save everybody. And so they have to sing this big song about the Enterprise, and I love that the song is about us finding our voice together through, working together, not being pushed apart. It is a very Star Trekian message of we form a community, a collective, even though that word has some connotations for Trekkies, but like form a collective, all working together, and not just for one person, but for the mission, for each other. And I really, really did like that. Overall, I always get hesitant on some level with songs that are like, we all work together for the machine. But Star Trek is a world where it's like the machine and the goal is to explore strange new worlds, to do the mission of explore boldly, to save others. So, if it was some other song where like, let's all be part of this machine, I would be a little bit more hesitant because it's Star Trek and it is about those ideals that I love. I thought this idea of community and connection and working together, I thought it hit perfectly. Loved it. Very Star Trek-y, like the Enterprise, I thought was great. And it leads to a big ending number. The one thing with this song that I will say that I didn't love, and I get what they were going for, was the interruption by the Klingons where they're doing like K-pop style music, which I admit did get a little bit of a chuckle out of me, but the thing with me is it felt like it interrupted the whole song, and I know it's supposed to interrupt and be a laugh, but it felt like a jarring laugh to me. It's hard to talk about this, like, because it's a kind of a vibe where it's like, I get what they were going for, and it came close to hitting, but I don't think it exactly hit in the exact, like, oh my god, that's hilarious, and oh my god, Klingons are doing K-pop kind of vibe. It kind of just felt a little disruptive to the flow of things and felt just kind of out of nowhere. If it had come earlier, maybe, or if we had like the Klingons doing opera, but it was like weird opera, I thought would have been like better. Even though I would have, if they did opera, they would have been like changed the Dishonored line earlier, but it just didn't work fully for me. And I didn't hate it. I want to say I didn't hate it, but it didn't fully land, I think, completely for me. So that's the one negative I have of the song. Otherwise, that song was great, no notes, everything explodes, wonderful. And then we wrap up the episode with Pike apologizing to Patel, and we also get Kirk La'an and Una sort of having a moment. I thought both of those are super sweet, and La'an sort of realizing, as we said, that she can, doesn't need someone else. And I will also say one thing with the Batel and Pike scene that we get at the end here, where she says, oh, I have a priority mission. Next week is the finale, and the next episode is called Hegemony. So I'm betting you it has to do with the Gorn, considering we saw them teased in the season premiere of this season at the end with Admiral April. And so I'm betting you that's what she's gonna be in danger next episode of Pike. I really hope they don't fridge her. I would really like to not have a woman on, Pike's girlfriend be fridged by the Gorn to give like Pike a thing for the Gorn. So fingers crossed that she's not fridged next episode, but I have a worry about that. That's my big concern. So that ends the musical episode of Star Trek. Like I said, I had a lot of fun with this one. This was a really good time. I think for me, I just think the songs were good, but they didn't hit the level of, again, like Scrubs or Buffy the Vampire Slayer in terms of like my favorite TV musicals. Like there was no song that really felt like Guy Love or, a couple of songs, like Once More with Feeling had several of those. And so there wasn't like a standout super strong song for me. But I did enjoy all of the songs. I had a lot of fun with this episode. I think they made all the right choices in terms of like creative decisions. And so yeah, there's just a couple things here and there that keep it being from like a 10 out of 10 for me, but it's still a really great episode and one that I had a lot of fun with. And I hope that this is the first of I hope many other musical episodes. I hope we get other musical episodes of Star Trek, not like all the time, but I would hope that we get more, at least one more. Like let's see a Lower Decks musical episode. I'm here for that. But what do you think? I would love to hear all of your thoughts down below. Did you like this episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds? Did you burst out into song? Did you like my rendition of the Star Trek Enterprise theme song? Because I was looking forward to that. But beyond all of that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper. It's been a long road getting from there to here. It's been a long time, but my time is finally near. And I will see my dreams come alive at last. I will touch the sky, and they're not gonna hold me down no more. No, they're not gonna change my mind, 'cause I've got faith of the heart, and no one's gonna bend or break me. I've got faith to believe I can do anything. I've got strength of the soul, and no one's gonna bend or break me. I can reach any star. I've got faith, faith of the heart. Had to do it, like I said.